everyone, and welcome to this Telit Cinterion webinar, Security for IoT, How to Protect Your IoT Deployment. I'm Amanda Flink, the head of global events here at Telit, and I'll be moderating today's event. Let's quickly get to know our speakers. To explain this topic today, I am pleased to be joined by three Telit Cinterion speakers. First, we have Enrico Milanese, the head of product security. Second, Martino Turcato, the head of software. And lastly, Thierry Nguyen, head of connectivity and solutions portfolio. Now, just before I hand it over to Thierry to start our presentation, I have a few quick reminders. I would like to remind our audience that we do have time to answer some questions at the end of the presentation. You can simply submit a question by posting in the questions box located near the bottom of your screen. Also, be sure to check out the resources section for some additional information on today's topic. There you can also find today's slide deck and other resources. And finally, we will send out this replay link to all attendees at the conclusion of the webinar. And with that, Thierry, I will hand it over to you to start our presentation today.
Yes, thank you very much. I hope we can help all the people listening to understand how they can protect their IoT deployment and why security is so important for them. Let's first have a look about what we're speaking about with IoT and why it matters for your business. We have projections that are suggesting that there will be 30 billion of devices deployed in 2025. In 2017, the number of connected devices surpassed the world human population, so more connected devices than people in the planet. Obviously, the business opportunity is huge, and this is driving transfer of a number of data that is constantly inflating. We're speaking about around 80 zettabytes of data in 2025, so a huge number of data. That is obviously also interesting all the cyber criminals who consider these IoT devices as a potential weakness in the system that they can use to create cyber attacks. And this is getting so important, this number of devices and the amount of data that we are speaking about, that the World Economic Forum is now reporting and considering that the cyber attack risk and the cyber criminality, like other potential natural disasters like climate changes or terrorism. So these are really risks that are not anymore the risk of one machine that is not working or that is losing connection. We're really speaking about a risk of losing instrumental services deployed across complete societies and potentially even used in some context of wars, so far more important and critical than just one machine not connecting to a network. So we understand that there is a huge number of devices, there is a big amount of data. So this is a big business opportunity, but this opportunity is coming with a risk. And I think we can try with Enrico to have a better understanding of what are these risks and the magnitude of the risk with some examples on concrete statistics.
Yeah, thank you, Thierry. We collected some statistics taken from recent cybersecurity papers, which describe that we have multiple threat actors or cyber attackers, which are continuously testing for weak IoT devices, and they are able to test new upcoming vulnerabilities with configurations very quickly in order to gain access to the device. Due to the broad usage of IoT solutions in different vertical markets, it's always difficult to create some unique statistics and trends. However, when we speak about IoT security topics, usually one of the main concerns, especially in some business-to-consumer segment, is related to the low skill set barriers needed to attack usually an IoT infrastructure. In those scenarios, we are not talking about advanced and sophisticated attacks, and the statistics from Palo Alto report highlight the fact that almost 60% of IoT solutions contains at least different high-impact vulnerabilities, making the IoT the low-hanging fruit for attackers. Another important aspect is related to the statistic of Sonic Wall cyber threat reports, where the security trend landscape is constantly evolving, as demonstrated by the increasing statistics of new malware attacks specifically tailored for the IoT segment. But what do the cyber criminal want? We could have different fraudsters or external threat agents with different goals. We tried to summarize some of the common ones tailored for the IoT space. Based on the specific IoT vertical markets and segments in the B2B and B2C perimeters, usually the external threat agents could target an IoT solution or to direct attack, for instance, for fraud attempts or solution misuse, create IoT service disruption, or to target the personal data handled by the IoT solution. Another goal is to take control of the IoT infrastructure for future and more complex attacks, which can be used to attack the internal company, IT or OT network, or use the IoT device to create botnets for distributed denial of service attacks. In this evolving risk scenario, a particular mention is related to the IoT ransomware. The fraudsters are reusing the same techniques of classic ransomware in the IoT world, but tailored for the IoT space. The IoT ransomware campaigns can amplify the impact of attacks due to the cascading consequences, especially in case of critical infrastructure. I think that we'll face increasing number of these attack scenario in the next years. We have to evaluate the risk not as a standalone risk in a single IoT solution, but we need to have a broader vision of the cyber risk, which could also impact other interconnected platforms. Another important piece is the reason behind why the IoT is one of the preferred targets for the cyber criminals. Well, as said before, the different IoT vertical segments from a security perspective are really heterogeneous. However, these indicators provide an essential window into the nature of the threat facing your IoT strategy. Understanding that every additional connected node in the chain creates an amplified vulnerability is crucial. These susceptibilities make IoT system attractive to criminals who are constantly probing for new devices and weaknesses, as demonstrated by the cybersecurity film statistics presented before. Their distributed nature means detection and prevention are necessary across the entire IoT value chain. In some B2B market, the adoption of connected devices stretch across the entire ecosystem, increasing the attack surface and also the risk of the shadow IoT. These IoT ecosystems could be interconnected with IT or operation technology environment and act as an easy entry point for attackers.
So we understand that the IoT security challenge is big. We understand what the cyber criminals want and why they are using the IoT as an attack surface. But all that looks maybe a bit like science fiction. So maybe, Enrico, you can help us understanding that it is not science fiction by giving us some concrete examples of attack that happened in the past.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Thierry. Indeed, we can cite a few examples, real examples, and what happens if our smart meters and grid infrastructure are compromised, or stop functioning properly, or report altered data, and what consequences would that have for our smart grids? The critical infrastructure segment is a vertical market strictly regulated, even from the cybersecurity perspective. However, even if these security threat scenarios could be seen at first glance unlikely, there are multiple entities which monitor the cyber threat landscape. A couple of years back, the National Security Agency released a public US warning related to the actors that have demonstrated their willingness to conduct malicious cyber activities against critical infrastructures, including utilities, given its critical role in economy. Moreover, citing a more recent formal statement from the Czech Republic National Cyber and Information Security Agency, which released a public warning on potential cyber security threat stemming from the use of specific smart meters that do not come from countries deemed to have trustworthy legal environment. In detail, the agency has identified a cybersecurity threats associated with the use of technology or software not originating from the states of European Union, European Economic Area, or Organization for Economic Cooperation Development area. Security breaches in this specific scenario could include interruptions like disconnect and a mass disconnection of thousands of consumption points can lead to blackouts. These blackouts can impact an entire country and its economy at the end. This is not science fiction, as said by Thierry, and another important example is that we can cite inside this webinar is the scenario in what happens if medical IoT devices settings are altered. How does it impact our privacy and even our life? Compromised medical IoT devices are a risk. Medical devices hardware often remains active for almost 10, 20 years or even more. So also the manufacturers need to offer a correct cybersecurity support for the whole product life cycle. According to the recent report conducted by a healthcare cybersecurity firm, medical devices are susceptible to cyber attacks, including, for instance, insulin pumps, intracardiac defibrillators, mobile cardiac telemetry, pacemakers, and so on. The threat actors who compromise these devices can direct them to give inaccurate readings, administer drug overdoses, or otherwise endanger patient health. To better understand the magnitude of the problem due to the increasing risk, the FBI, the last September, released a public notification related to the cyber attack opportunities of outdated medical devices. Last year, a research report conducted by a cybersecurity firm found that almost 50% of connected medical devices and other Internet of Things devices in hospitals had known critical vulnerabilities. Due to the rising concern in such area, in March 2023, the Food and Drug Administration in US issued a further policy guidance of immediate implementation to vendors in order to mitigate this cyber risk. The requirement will take effect 90 days from the law being passed, giving vendors until October the 1st of this year to prepare submission meetings to the new standards. In this scenario, it's not only possible to have concerns, but we can cite many other vertical segment risk scenarios in automotive and vehicle services, smart devices, and home automation. So it's not a science fiction, as Thierry said.
Yes, thank you very much, Enrico, for these examples, which are only few examples among many different stories or other situations where cyber criminals were using IoT as their attack surface. When we speak about IoT security on IoT, we often use the idea of the different layers of an IoT solution because it's much more than just one device in the field. it's connected to the cloud through the network. So we are used to speak about the different layers of an IoT solution. On Martino, you can probably introduce the different layers on why they are relevant for the security for all these IoT systems and solutions.
Sure, Thierry. So a well-designed IoT solution is usually a complex structure where the information flow from the edge to the core of the business through many layers. So to secure the IoT solution, it is essential to break down these various capabilities and functions of the system, and also identify the points of transition between them. So if you do that, you can establish a series of security measures which reflect the way in which the IoT system operates. And also by implementing a security approach that is tailored to the needs and the characteristics of your IoT solution, you can ensure that your organization is well positioned to face and to cope with the evolving security threats that are inherent to an hyper-connected world. But we have to be careful because what works and is accepted for some verticals and applications may not work or be sufficient for securing other verticals. So, for example, what could be a good fit for smart agriculture, for example, may not fit smart metering. So, in essence, the critical steps of this process are two. The first is creating a catalog of these IoT assets and the critical functions associated to it across the entire chain. And then we need to develop the security strategies identified in the risk management process for all these layers. Now, if we look at this diagram, we have a physical device equipped with sensors, peripherals, and controllers at the edge of this solution. Then, moving up in the stack, this device collects data from the sensors or can even take actions on the physical world through some actuators. And the device and the nearby infrastructure have some computing capabilities, some edge intelligence that is used to process data locally. And this is done for multiple reasons. It is done to reduce the latency, to increase the autonomy of the solution, but also, to reduce data. So basically decrease the load on the network and the cloud. Now, when the data is processed, it is sent over a network to be collected efficiently and securely by systems that are specialized to do that. Then data is further processed, is prepared and rationalized for the integration into the enterprise IT systems and analytics. And this is done to extract value and ultimately to enable the business processes and the business decisions. So when we look at the setup of an IoT solution, we can identify several attack surfaces that could potentially be exploited by cyber attackers. And there are important questions that we have to ask ourselves when we assess security. And here in this slide, we have a sample of the most important ones. So first of all, it is important to verify if a device is being compromised during the manufacturing process. For example, by exposing secrets or loading the wrong software. We also need to ensure that the code running on the device is always trusted and all the keys, the credentials are securely stored. We also must put in place the tools and the services to distribute the software and the security patches and to monitor the device to detect any strange behavior that may occur and may be signaling an ongoing attack. It's also important to control who has access to the device and avoid that unauthorized people can potentially tamper the settings. Managing digital identities is another important aspect of security. It's a key aspect of security. And it's important to correctly implement the authentication and authorization layers to protect the data and to protect the access to the services ecosystem. We also need to have operations that are managed according to the best practices and security framework. We must implement a robust connectivity management service and securely manage access to the configuration or to the functions that are used to enable or disable the device SIM card, because this can really disrupt the service and disconnect the device forever. And following the layered approach, here we can summarize some of the most important protection mechanisms and best practices. This is not an exhaustive list, but this can help really secure your solution and answer at least some of the questions that we listed in the previous slide. Starting from the bottom, from the device, all the devices must be provisioned with an identity that will allow to authenticate and securely onboard to the services. This process is usually enabled at manufacturing time mainly to simplify operations and to increase security. And to avoid the execution of malicious software, devices should cryptographically check the software before the execution. This is a mechanism that is also known as secure boot. Any updates or changes to the device firmware should be done securely and reliably without introducing vulnerabilities. Also, several chips or electronic components have secure building blocks that allow, for example, to store credentials and keys in a secure vault. So whenever these features are available, we must take advantage of it. Also, all the communications must be encrypted using state-of-the-art cryptographic implementations. Physical and logical interfaces. So we should secure these interfaces either by locking them, for example, in field when the device is deployed, we should disable debug ports, or at least we should allow only secured and authenticated access. Lifecycle management is important as well. We need lifecycle management services to ensure that the device, including the configuration, the software, and the identity, is properly provisioned, monitored, and maintained over the life cycle of the product, from the initial installation to the final decommissioning. On the connectivity layer, there are important benefits of using robust connectivity management platforms. These platforms offer a range of features that can help address various challenges associated with managing IoT devices, IoT connections. We can monitor network traffic and usage patterns, for example, to identify potential abuses. They can help detect outages and distributed denial of services attacks at an early stage, so that we can take appropriate action to mitigate the impact. And these platforms can monitor and detect unauthorized endpoints, and this is to avoid fraud. And you can also address privacy concerns, leveraging private APNs to establish a secure and private network for the devices. On the cloud level, it's important to use a trusted cloud provider. This is key to protect applications and data. Secure and device provisioning into a third-party cloud involves ensuring that all the devices connecting to your application or cloud service are provisioned securely. This is something we already mentioned also in the previous slides. Identity and access management is another critical aspect for application level security, which involves controlling that access to your assets and data and ensuring that only authorized users or authorized applications are able to use critical data, critical information. Encrypted communication links. This is important as well for security of your applications. This involves encrypting all communication links to ensure that the data transmitted between devices and the applications is protected from interception and tampering. Service and data integration for third-party services is another aspect because third-party services and APIs used by the applications must be secure and must not introduce vulnerabilities. So always take care of this aspect when you use third-party services. And then logging and monitoring. If we log and monitor all the activities, we are able to detect situations that could indicate a security breach or other issues. And finally, on the compliancy, this involves all the components. So one way to achieve security is through the adoption of international cybersecurity frameworks for operations and processes. These frameworks provide guidelines and can help you identify potential vulnerabilities and risks. Business continuity management and resiliency plans ensure that your applications and data are available and accessible even in the case of a disaster or other disruption. And I would like to conclude with some remarks on how Telit Cinterion can help you secure your solutions. Since we've been in this market for more than 20 years and we have a range of solutions spanning the full IoT value chain, we have a unique position to understand the challenges in every area of an IoT solution. We offer a comprehensive toolkit to address common risks and vulnerabilities in your IoT ecosystem. And we can help you build your IoT solution throughout the various stages of a project, thanks to our experts and the global support organization. We provide wireless module for connecting your assets. We offer SIMs, data plans, and we provide profile activation services for you if you prefer to bring your own connectivity provider. And we also have a full portfolio of software and cloud services to simplify the design, the deployment, and the lifecycle management of IoT. And we can also help you securely onboard on hyperscaler clouds and other services with the identity management tools in our portfolio. So really a broad range of solutions, even for your most complex and difficult needs. With that, I've concluded my part on the multi-layer approach to security and handing over to Thierry for the final considerations.
Thank you very much, Martino. And I'm sure that all these explanations help people who are listening to understand better the importance of considering IoT security seriously and to consider that at the very beginning of the definition of their IoT business and solutions. I think they probably realize also the importance partnering with suppliers who can help them identifying risk and who can help them also building a solution that will guarantee that their IoT devices and solutions will be deployed safely. To keep helping you embracing this security challenge on the security questions, Telit Cinterion will publish a white paper that will cover all the items that were presented today and more. So stay tuned on the social media, and I'm sure that you have the opportunity to download very soon this paper to learn even more about security. And I think from there, we can continue with Amanda. There may be some questions from the audience that we can try to answer.
Great, thanks guys. And just real quick before we get to the questions, audience, I am going to drop a poll on your screen here. If you have any specific questions or you'd like to have one of our experts contact you, please just respond here on the poll and someone will reach out to you. Like Thierry said, we do have time for a few questions, and there's still time to ask a question. So please submit using the box on your screen there, and we will do our best to cover it in the time we have left. We've gotten a few so far, so let's just dive right in here. The first question I see talking about guidelines, standards, and regulation in the IoT world. Can you help to enforce the awareness on the cybersecurity topics?
Yes, Amanda, I can take this one. Yes, IoT security and regulation is a hot topic, especially in the last years. Many steps forward have been made. Different organizations and regulatory bodies have defined multiple security guidelines for multiple markets to improve the awareness about cybersecurity topics. Well, however, I think that without a strong commitment of the lawmakers, the approach about the cybersecurity topics will not change. Fortunately, I think the reforms are on the way. In Europe, for instance, with the Cyber Security Resilience Act to introduce, which introduce cybersecurity rules to ensure more secure hardware and software products, will be a huge paradigm shift for the IoT market, and potentially we'll see in the next years a potential change how all the value chain and the IoT stakeholders will use the new regulation. Also, other countries all around the world are moving forward in such direction. For instance, United Kingdom in December of the last year released the Product Security and Telecommunication Infrastructure Act, and which moreover follows the same path of the Cyber Resilience Act in different aspects. So we can cite also other countries, for instance, the Australia, Singapore, South Korea, and so on. I think we are still facing heterogeneous and different approaches, but yeah, the new upcoming regulations which are emerging will improve the situation dramatically. We'll see in the next years the real impact on the market, I think.
Great, thanks, Enrico. Next question I have is, if I am starting a new project, what should I do first? What security considerations should be prioritized?
Okay, I can cover this, and I try to be very, say, practical in the approach that I recommend. And I think first of all that asking this question is already a good start, because the most important thing is to acknowledge the fact that security must be considered since the very beginning of the design. Because a bolt-on approach, so basically adding security at the end of a solution design, is not a viable and successful approach. This is for sure. This is something we have seen multiple times, and it never works, or let's say it's not so effective. So the multi-layer concept which I presented today, I think is a good start. It's very helpful in running the risk assessment and defining the security measures. And if you don't have experience, the recommendation is to find a partner that can assist you in this process. Then it's difficult to highlight specific aspects since the approach should be as comprehensive, as holistic, let's say, as possible. But based on our experience, there are some areas that are usually neglected, although these areas should be well known in the industry, because these are topics that have been discussed for a long time. I'm referring, for example, to the importance of defining a strategy for identity and onboarding of the assets into the services. So defining an identity strategy for your devices, for example. And also, all the communication should be not only encrypted, but also based on mutual authentication according to zero trust security model. And then software updates. Software updates is another critical item, and more in general, implementing lifecycle management tools to keep your deployment up to date and to be able to monitor it. And then it's critical to properly run your operations, assessing the risks and increasing your resiliency. That usually should be done according to some of the frameworks that are available. For example, at Telit Cinterion, we adopted the ISO 27001 framework, but it's just one of the available options. But the recommendation is to embrace one of these framework and implement it in your business and operations.
Great, thank you. Next question I have, I would like to know more about possible security solutions from Telit with respect to AWS Express Link.
Okay, I can take this also. For those that are not familiar with the AWS Express Link concept, AWS IoT Express Link is a software that is integrated in wireless modules developed and distributed by AWS partners. Telit Cinterion is a partner on this initiative and other initiatives from AWS, because we have also other products in our portfolio. So you probably have seen a recent announcement of our first module in this family, in this Express Link family, the Alina Intensive one. It's a Cat 1 module, but more will follow. So Express Link modules essentially provide a simplified set of AT commands to easily connect to AWS cloud and services. And they also implemented the AWS security requirements, which include several aspects, such as secure implementation of some critical feature, defining a threat model, pen testing, but most importantly, they include pre-provisioning with the certificates and the keys that allow to connect out of the box to the AWS services. And so we leveraged in order to implement this product, we leveraged many of the services that we already and the features that we already implemented for our modules. And for example, for this specific aspect, we leverage the identity management services that we can offer to our customers to provision and manage identity that can be used to connect to potentially any third-party services and cloud. And Express Link is one of the use cases that we are able to serve.
Great, thank you, Martino. Maybe time for just one more question here, and let me pick this one. So since threat vectors keep changing, is there a way to get IoT devices to automatically update to new threats?
Yes, Amanda, I can take this one. Well, yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think this is one of the great challenges in the IoT space. First of all, I think that we need to, as discussed in the current webinar, how the threat actors and the cyber criminals move in this space, and the recent statistics which just discussed today is a dynamic and evolving threat scenario. So, given said that is not always easy, especially in some specific vertical IoT markets, to implement a correct cybersecurity strategy to correctly mitigate or reduce the risk in such environment. But we can mention some strategies that should be taken into account. And as said by Martino before, for sure, one of the first one is to apply security by default and by design in the IoT solution, in your IoT solution implementation and design, just because it's not possible to inject security at the end of a process, or at the end of IoT design. And moreover, if adopted and implemented correctly, could facilitate risk analysis and prevent further damages in case of a new vulnerability. On top of that, one of other approaches, which is just a classic basic cybersecurity hygiene approach, is minimize the attack surface in the IoT solution. That most of the time could mitigate or reduce dramatically the risk of the new upcoming vulnerabilities, new upcoming security threats, or new attack scenarios. So with just these two approaches, if implemented correctly, of course, we could significantly reduce the risk. Moreover, in some vertical markets, it's advisable to implement monitoring solution that could be able to detect anomalies and potential abuses in a proactive way. And I think this is one of another of the approaches that we can suggest to be implemented in final IoT deployments.
Thanks, Enrico. Guys, I believe that is all the time that we have for today. Audience, please be sure to check your inboxes in the coming days for this replay link. As Thierry mentioned, keep an eye out for that upcoming white paper. Enrico, Martino, Thierry, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you everybody who joined us.
Thank you.
Thank you.